hand over all my tasks so you can get rid of me. Okay. By user TazRegion63. Not sure if this is exactly Mick, but here goes. A few years back, I was the contracts and supplier manager at a large company. Been there for 25 years and had a lot of corporate knowledge, having worked in multiple roles over that time. Also was very well paid due to length of tenure and experience at the company. A whole boss gets hired and proceeds to get rid of people he doesn't like and hires his buddies into various roles. The workplace culture took a nosedive pretty quickly. I knew my time was limited as I wasn't in his inner circle. And seeing the writing on the wall, I started looking for and applying for other roles. The awful boss gets me in their sights and decides to get rid of me, looking to move one of his recently hired buddies to my specialized role. He doesn't even understand what I do, needing a lot of technical knowledge combined with contract and legal. He tells me he wants to move me onto an upcoming project and to finish off what I'm currently working on and not take on any new work. Through all my contacts across the company, I knew that there was no new project or even significant budget for one, but I'll do what I'm told. I wrap up my work and tell him I'm ready for the project. He says, sit tight, it's not far away, and don't start anything else. So I sit at my desk, applying for other jobs and waiting. One of the jobs I applied for comes through and get an offer on a Friday morning. That same afternoon, the a-hole boss comes around and says the project isn't happening, and as you have nothing else on your plate, we will have to let you go. Yahtzee. I know there is heaps of work backed up, and the shit is going to hit the fan soon when contracts aren't renewed, services canceled, etc. I also know my employment contract, and they will have to pay a generous redundancy because the boss told him my role isn't required anymore. I say, okay, I guess you will have to pay me a redundancy too. Sure, he says, not knowing what he has agreed to. So I go through the redundancy process and at the same time accept the offer of the new job. Come my last day, I happily accept the $200 payout. His face goes pale when he hears of the amount because it comes out of the team's budget. Walk out the door and into the new job the day after. Love my new job, less stress, great culture, a great team. Wish I'd left earlier, but then I wouldn't have got the payout if I resigned. 4 weeks later, I hear the shit is hitting the fan and they advertise for a new person for my old role as no one knows what to do. Because apparently my job was easy. He didn't even ask me document what I did to hand over to anyone else. And boss demands overtime pay for zero work. Okay? By user fun. Pin 9061. So this happened a while back, but the memory still brings a smirk to my face whenever I think about it. I used to work for a company where the boss had this habit of demanding that we stay late, even when there was absolutely no work left to be done. It was one of those toxic environments where productivity was measured by the hours you spent at your desk rather than the actual output of your work. One day, after wrapping up all my tasks, well before the end of the day, my boss came over and told me that I needed to stay late because that's just how things are done around here. Mind you, there was literally nothing left for me to do. Now, instead of arguing or trying to reason with him, I decided to play along with his ridiculous demand for overtime pay. I nodded, grabbed a book I had been meaning to read, and settled back into my chair. For the next 2 hours, I sat at my desk, flipping through pages, occasionally pretending to jot down notes and looking as busy as possible. At the end of those 2 hours, my boss came by to check on me, expecting to see me toiling away at some imaginary task.
Instead, he found me reading a novel.
He looked puzzled and asked, "What are you doing?" With a straight face, I replied, "Well, you asked me to stay late, so I figured I might as well put in some overtime." This book has been on my reading list for a while. Needless to say, my boss was speechless. He couldn't really argue with me since he had asked me to stay late, and I was technically still on the clock. From that day forward, he never asked me to stay late unless there was actual work to be done. Malicious compliance at its finest. Dr. Boss demanded I stay late for no reason. So I decided to put in overtime by reading a book at my desk. You will search every third car by user Fetzerain. So I worked security for a major military contractor at one point. Our supervisor liked using our random search number as a tool for punishment for perceived grievances with us. Normally, our search number was something around 1525, meaning we would only pull over and search every 15 car in every contractor truck. It was very cold and very miserable in the mornings when we would suddenly have a couple hundred employees and contractors show up between 500 and 800. This day, our supervisor got upset because when he came in at 400 for his day shift, he was the 15th car, deciding that he must now ruin everyone else's day, even though we did our best to search his vehicle promptly, but completely, so he couldn't say we weren't doing the searches completely. So he set the day shift search number to 3, so we complied. There was only enough room for 3 trucks to be pulled over at once, and once that was done, we would usually stop searches until the others were completed, keeping traffic moving. Not today. This time, we filled the search area, and then stopped traffic until all 3 vehicles were cleared, then allowed 2 cars through, pull over the third, allow 2, pull third, allow 2, pull third, allow 2, pull third, stop all traffic, and start searches. And we ended up with a line of cars waiting to get into the plant that went 2 miles long. It got so long the local police got involved up the road as people were blocking traffic in some intersections. Then came the phone call from a 3-star general that stuck in that said traffic a mile up the road. Suddenly, we were called to cease all searches for the morning. I later heard that it had been too little, too late to cancel the ridiculous searches, and a major military contractor lost a $1 billion contract out of the deal. And that supervisor was initially going to be fired, but negotiated his way to just being busted down to a regular guard. We were union, so he started lowest on the seniority chart and got stuck working all the mandatory overtime and all the worst posts, including the one he had made miserable that morning. Edit. I should have noted that 2 weeks later, said contract was renegotiated after the company I worked for explained that the person responsible for the general's limousine being held up in traffic for almost an hour had been reassigned. No innocent jobs were lost in the making of this mock. Usernames must follow district education policies. By user worldly, leg 74. At my first job decades ago, as the junior employee on the staff for a school, I was in charge of setting up email addresses for new teachers. The district had Microsoft Exchange for email, and the education policy was that all teacher email addresses would follow the same format. First initial, then last name, unless we had another teacher of the same name, which never happened because we only had another teachers in the district. However, we did have a new teacher, Greg Roper, who I decided to just set up as simply Roperg. Once all the new usernames were set up, my boss, our bureaucratic assistant principal, reviewed them all and sent me a short note telling me to fix Greg's username to comply with the school's standard format. Well, I didn't see the note until my next workday, and by that time, principal's assistant had left for a vacation to Hawaii. Facing a deadline to publish all the emails for the school website and back to school email, I went ahead and followed orders. Username changed to Groper. Email set to Groper Washington Unified org, and everything was quiet for about a week. But then students began to receive their welcome emails, directing them to contact their teachers using the newly assigned email addresses. Next thing I knew, I got an urgent, slightly flustered call from the principal himself. I printed off that email directive from the assistant principal and went up to the principal's office, where I found both of them sitting side by side. Apparently, several concerned parents had already contacted the school, questioning the appropriateness of the teacher's email address. The assistant principal, still tan from his vacation, started to low. He chastised me for not catching this sooner, while his sunburned face turned even redder from embarrassment when I plopped down the email thread from a week earlier, where he explicitly asked to make Greg's email comply with school policy. The principal's expression was priceless. The assistant principal left with his tail between his legs, and I had a new email Roper created for the teacher that afternoon. Greg was so grateful that he actually took me to lunch, joking that it was the least he could do after the crazy ordeal. School name changed to protect privacy, required to make time for something the higher-ups wanted, so I used it for audit. By user, she's always by wolves. My department heads recently suggested that employees shadow doctors in the department in order to learn more about workflow and reasoning and treatment diagnosis. However, they put it entirely on the staff to set up when they would come in and shadow. Any attempts to get the higher-ups to work with us on setting up a schedule fell on deaf ears, and the resolution we got was to come in on an off day to volunteer. Well, I had double night shift coming up with a lot of off days afterwards, so I decided to shadow on my last shift. I ended up shadowing for most of a full day shift before getting checked off to go home. Later in the week, I'd get a call from the department manager in shambles that I did that much odd. When I told them it was never made clear if we were to clock out or not for shadowing and that emails never got answered, I said I couldn't be blamed. The conversation ended quickly, and later a schedule was set up so that employees could shadow on their shift. Tell Dr. required to do continuing education even on an off day, decided to be a cowboy for an obese paycheck, and